The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our ePREP webinar this afternoon. I am Charles, and I'll be leading with the webinar. I see we're scheduled to start at 2:30, and it's 2:25 right now. I'd like us to just give 5 minutes to anyone who needs to log in to actually get logged in and settled before we start. Thank you once more, and we'll just give 5 minutes while we wait for everyone to get logged in. Hello, and thank you all once more for coming in for our webinar this afternoon. Again, I'm Charles, and I'll be presenting on the webinar. So this is our final webinar on ePREP basics, but I'd just like everyone to know that if you would like to go through the slides or the webinar we'll go through today, you can always find that on the Maryland webpage. We would have this posted probably by the end of the day or maybe tomorrow, so you can always get back on it to go through if you need to do that. So we'll just go right into the webinar right now. Okay. So this is an overview of what we'll be talking about during the webinar today. We'll be looking at the benefits of using ePREP, some helpful resources, and we'll be looking at definitions and getting better understanding of things like user profiles, which we'll be finding on the portal, and business profiles. We'll equally look at the different kind of applications that we can create on ePREP and the different kind of applications that exist on ePREP. We'll equally be looking at how to sign applications and how to check on the statuses of different applications on ePREP. Okay. So like we all know, ePREP stands for Electronic Provider Revalidation and Enrollment Portal. And here are some of the benefits of ePREP. Applications can now be filled out electronically instead of paper like we previously used to do, which makes it a little bit faster and quicker to fill out. The good thing about ePREP is when we choose to do an application, it generates only the areas that are necessary, or it generates only the fields that are necessary for what we wanted to do. So we don't have to go through a whole application or a whole application to get one little thing done. And the processing time on ePREP is shorter than what we used to have before. We equally have access to Maryland Medicaid information on ePREP, and you should be able to see the status of your account and equally check on your affiliations. And with ePREP, you should now be able to see all your demographic information, basically everything that the state has on you for Medicaid, like your address, your Medicaid number, and NPIs. We can now find all of that on ePREP, which is really, really good. And here are some helpful sources we have on ePREP for when you start using it. In case you need help, you can always get a lot of information from the Maryland webpage. If you go to the link health.maryland.gov/ePREP, you can actually see it here in blue. There's a lot of information on there on ePREP and a lot of information on what you equally need for your applications. We equally have an avatar, Lucy, who will be your enrollment buddy once you get to start using ePREP. And every time or every page you get on ePREP, she would always come up and provide you with some very helpful information on how to walk your way through ePREP and even applications if you're working on that. And on ePREP, if you equally hover around information, we equally have an action item or text box that comes up and provides you with more information on that area. So usually if you hover on anything, a little text box comes up that provides you with information. We equally have in-context tutorials, and you can see on my left here, I have a little film strip which will show up in certain parts of ePREP. So if you click on it, it'll pull up a video box like the one we have down here in blue. And it equally provides you with information if you're not sure of what to do in a specific section on ePREP. You can always just click on the box and it will play a short video of 2 or 3 to 5 minutes. So some of the definitions on ePREP I was talking about, like user profiles, which we'll be dealing with. So Your starting point with ePREP is just like any other website that requires you to set up a username and a password. When signing up for the portal, each user must create a user profile. All users who use the ePREP portal must have a user profile. This profile allows ePREP to recognize you as a portal member, and this membership is used to provide access to your business profile. It is equally very good to know that once you have a user profile on ePREP, it stays with you. Even if you, for example, if you were working at one location and you decide to move to another location, you can always access your business profile using that user profile no matter where you go. So as you move, you always just have to log in and you should be able to use that profile. Here's a good look at how to get yourself signed up on ePREP. At the top of the page in blue, we would always have that login option and the sign up in blue, and we equally have the contact us and bulletins. But usually for new users, you always want to sign up. And when you click on sign up, it pulls up a drop down like this. You would have to fill in your first name, your last name, your phone number, and an active email address. You would actually need to have access to that email address because once you sign up, an email is sent to you through that email. So you want to make sure that the email address you're providing is actually valid and active. And you would equally have to provide a password of at least 8 characters, and it would have to have one capitalized letter or one capitalized letter, a symbol, and a number. And of course, we always want to remember to click on the I'm not a robot option for verification purposes. And once we go through that first page, we equally have the password recovery page. On this page, you would have to answer 3 questions, which you can use in the future if you happen to forget your password. And you would have to answer those questions again in order to recover your password. As we can see, Lucy is equally on here on the left. Like I said earlier, she would always come up with information to help us as we go through with ePREP. So here's an example of one of the questions we'll always find on our password recovery. If you click on the option, it pulls up questions like your favorite movie, what was your first school, or your first mascot. And here's another look of how the password recovery page looks like. So like I said, you would have the option of picking 3 questions and answering those questions. And we would equally have to indicate a recovery email. You can always use the same email you used to sign up as your recovery email. By just clicking on the little box here, it would auto-populate that email below, and you can use that email for your recovery email. And Lucy, once more, comes up and explains to us how to work our way through this page. Once you enter your user profile information and select your security questions and answers, ePREP sends a verification email to make sure the email address you entered for your username is a real email. You would have to check your email for an email from noreply@dhrarbor.com with the subject that usually goes ePREP portal activation email. You may have to check your spam, junk, trash, or clutter folders to find the email because sometimes it actually doesn't go to your inbox. So we advise that you check those other sections to see if that email was sent to one of them. Once you find the email, you can click on a link that is provided within the email, and it looks like this. And the email will always have a link that says ePREP portal activation. So you would have to click on that link in order to access the profile you just created. Usually this email lasts for 30 days. And this is a look at how once you click on that link in the email, this is how the sign up looks like for the first time. So your username is auto-populated at the top, which is going to be the email you provided. So that's going to be your username. And you would have to put in the password you created whenever you were signing up in order to get access to the portal in full. The ePREP portal provides a centralized and secure environment called the Business Profile. The Business Profile houses all your Maryland Medicaid accounts and applications, including your NPIs, MA numbers, or tax IDs. It equally has information like your service address, your pay to address, and all that information, like I said earlier, that you provided for Medicaid can be accessed under your business profile. And every user or every profile may have access to one or more business profiles. Here's a look at the verification process for when we get ourselves logged into ePREP, because you have to it's good to understand that your user profile is just like a house. So once you create your user profile, it actually doesn't have your business information in there yet, or your business profile. So you would have to verify yourself or your NPI in order to pull up all your Medicaid information. And here's how you go through that process. You would have to put in your NPI number to go through the verification, and it would ask you, so you put in your NPI number, and it will take you through a verification process where you will have to answer some of the questions in order to get full access to your business profile. So you put in your NPI and you click on verify, and you will have to put in your business profile name. And then it pulls up the questions for verification. So you can, a lot of this information is pretty much information you already have on Medicaid. So it's just asking you those questions, like I said, for verification in order to pull up all your information. And if you need help answering some of these questions, you would have to equally go through the verification process in a call center, and they can provide you with some of these answers. So if you don't have access to all the answers or the questions they're asking you on here, you may call the call center and go through their short verification process in order to access some of this information if you do not have that. And once you go through the verification process, your business profile is then created. Here's a look at how the business profile is once you go through the verification process. At the top of the screen, it usually has your user profile name, and in the middle by the building icon, it has the business profile name. So say you were a credentialer and you were working for a group or a hospital, it should have your name under the user profile section, and the name of the hospital in the business profile section. And if you were an individual doctor who just created your account, it should normally have your name under the user profile, and it should equally have your name under the business profile section. And of course, you can always click on any of these sections, or you can actually click on the buildings in order to access other parts of the portal. There are several different kinds of applications in ePREP. Most can be started from the application section of ePREP, but some need to be started in the accounts section. ePREP will generate just the fields of the application that are necessary. Like, for example, if you were trying to create an application to update your service address, and you indicate that you want to make changes only for your service address, ePREP would generate an application that would have you fill out only the sections for your service address. So you don't have to do a whole new application just to update your service address. Once an application is submitted, the enrollment team will review all of the information and get back to you as soon as possible. You can always check on the progress of your applications directly on ePREP, usually under the application section. Here's a look at the different kind of applications we can create on ePREP. The first one we have here is a new group application. This application is usually to enroll a new practice location with at least one affiliated rendering provider. So you cannot actually create a new group if you do not have a rendering provider for that group. Another kind of application we can create is the new rendering application. And this is an application to enroll an individual practitioner new to Medicaid to be affiliated with one of your group locations. So, like I said about the new group application, if you're doing a new rendering application, you would equally need to have a group that you'll be adding yourself or the provider to. So a new rendering application will be to create a new application for a new Medicaid provider who would like to be affiliated to an existing group. And we equally have the rendering S application, which is a simplified application to affiliate a group and a rendering provider, both of whom are already enrolled in Medicaid. So if a provider is not enrolled with Medicaid, you cannot affiliate that provider to a group. You would have to create a new application for that provider in order to add them to a group. And it's vice versa for the groups too. So there would have to be existing Medicaid groups or individuals in order for you to create a rendering S application. We equally have a supplemental application, which is to change providers' account information or required documentations, such as your correspondence address or an updated professional license. We equally have a revalidation application, which is to renew your Medicaid enrollment. This is usually done every 5 years. It's scheduled, and it is usually scheduled automatically. So you should first receive a mail at your location or your address that will tell you about your revalidation that is due. And once you get yourself signed up on ePREP, you will equally get a notification on the portal that will tell you how much time you have left to get that revalidation done. Other application types on ePREP are a disaffiliation application. Usually this application is to cancel an affiliation between a rendering provider and an existing group or facility. So this application can be created from either the provider's account or from the group's account. So if the group was trying to disenroll a provider from their location, or if a provider was no longer practicing under a certain group, they would have to create a disaffiliation application to get themselves disaffiliated from that group. We equally have a disenrollment application, which is not very common, and this application can only be started from the accounts tab. This is usually for people who don't want to practice under Medicaid anymore, or say you were going on retirement, you would go under your accounts tab and create a disenrollment application to get yourself removed from the Medicaid program. Here's a good look at how the applications look like on ePREP. As we can see, the applications part is underlined in red. And this is a group billing application. Usually at the top of the screen here, we would have these bars that indicate the percentage of how far we've gone on the application. The first one tells you the percentage you've gone on the application, and the second one tells you the percentage of documents needed, or the percentage of documents you've already put in that application. So once this says 100% complete and 100% complete for documents, then you've successfully put in everything that is required for your application, and you may be able to submit that application. A quick, very important thing to notice or take note of on the applications is the content section. Usually this section has the different parts of the application, and it's very good to keep in mind that we have these little circles on the side to tell you the progress of your application as you go through. Usually if you have a blue circle, like we can see up here on the Getting Started section, it indicates that you've completed that section. And when the circle is fully filled in and orange, or if it's halfway filled in and it's in orange, that indicates that you're in that section. And usually when the circle is emptied or not fully blued out, it means that that section is empty and needs you to fill out that section in order to submit your application. And when it's halfway filled in, it means that you're missing out information, like what we can see under the submit application section. That indicates that we're missing out application in that section, and we need to go in there and get that completed. And like I said earlier about the film strips on ePREP, as you can see here, we do have a film strip, which if you click on, it would always pull up this video box, which you can always click on to view the 3 to 5 minute tutorials that can equally help you with applications if you feel like you have difficulties in there. Here's another look of how the applications look like. And on here, if we notice, the getting started section at the top is fully blued out, which means that we've completed that section. The business information section is equally fully blued out. And the practice information has a half blued circle, which indicates that we have information missing out in that section. So we have to get that filled in or put in order to get the application completed. And under the submit application section, usually once you go through your application, we do have a checklist on the applications that help you see everything you've gone so far on the application. And under the checklist section, it always looks like this. So wherever you have a green checkbox that indicates that you've completely filled out that section of the application and everything is good to go. And if you have a red X, that indicates that you probably didn't put in everything you needed to do on that section of the application, or you never filled in anything there at all. Usually you can actually access that section of the application real quick by just clicking on the pencil right next to that X. And it will take you directly to that section where you were missing out information, and you can get that filled out in order to complete your application. And here's a look at a completed application. If we notice at the top here, it says 100% complete and 100% complete with documents. And all the circles are fully blued out, and the checklist section is orange, which means that we are in that section. And this application right now is actually okay to be submitted. And one other nice thing to notice about the portal is whenever you're doing an application under the package type, it usually tells you what kind of application you're working on. Like here, this is the supplemental application this person was working on to do updates. If you look under package type, it reminds you that you're doing a supplemental application. All applications must be electronically signed on ePREP, and who can sign will depend on the type of application. You can sign for an existing account that was already enrolled in ePREP. For new accounts, the person signing must add themselves as an owner or managing employee in the disclosure section. That is usually, we usually have situations like this when we're working on group applications, where you would have to add yourself as an owner or managing employee in order to sign the group application. New rendering providers and solo practitioners need to sign their own applications on ePREP. So a credentialer cannot log into their credentialing account and get a new rendering provider or solo practitioner's application signed. That has to only be signed from the new rendering or solo practitioner's ePREP account. On a rendering S application only, you may sign on behalf of a rendering provider if you are an administrator on the provider's business profile. When you have completed the group signature, you would have to send that application to the rendering provider's account in order for the provider to sign, indicating that they are trying to add themselves to that group location too. So for rendering S applications, the signing usually works on two parts. The rendering provider signs the application, indicating that they're trying to add themselves to the location, and the location equally signs, or the group usually has to sign the application, also indicating that they are approving this provider to be part of their location now. And here's a look at a new group's application and how you can add yourself or how you can add the owners of the group or an administrator in order to sign the application. You can equally be an authorized signee in order to sign a group's application, but you would have to add yourself in there under the disclosure section, as you can see here, and under the ownership or control interest section, you would have the option to add yourself there. Usually you would have to click on this add button on the blue, the add option here in blue, in order to add yourself or add an owner to the group's account in order to sign this location at the end. And again, if you need help with that, we still have that film strip usually on the side that will give you more guidance on how to go about adding an administrator or signee or ownership to a group application. And usually before we sign any applications on ePREP, we have the Maryland Medicaid provider agreement. You always have to click on this agreement in blue in order to view the full agreement before you would have access to actually sign any application on ePREP. So once we go through that agreement, then we should be able to we would have a page like this where you would be asked for the last 4 digits of your social security, your year of birth, and your email address is usually auto-populated, and your password, which is the password you created when you were signing up for ePREP. So every time you have to sign an application, you would have to go through the same process to put in your last 4 digits of your social security, the year of birth, the email address, again, like I said, will be auto-populated, and the password you created on signing up for ePREP. And you would always have check marks whenever that information is accurate or the section becomes green before you can actually submit your application. One good thing about ePREP is the fact that we have access to check the statuses of our applications. Usually you can check the status of your application under the application section of ePREP. And it would have, under the status, it would always tell you if your application is still in progress, if you've completed that application and submitted it, if the application was approved or denied, and if the application was returned to you, if say the reviewer needed more information from you, they have that option of sending that application back to you so you can view it on the portal and make the necessary changes. And it would equally tell you when you've resubmitted an application and when that application is approved. We equally have a little icon like a clock. You can see one on my right here, that where if you click on, it will give you a lot more information on the status of your application. Here's a good look at how to view the status of your application. Like I said, you would have to be under the application section, and it will provide you with your application ID number. As we can see here, this person has 3 applications in their account right now, and 2 of those applications were already approved. They have one that they just submitted, and it equally tells you what type of application, and it tells you what type of application and the percentage of that application as you go through it. And if we notice, it equally has the owner of that application. So it tells you who created that application and the status of the application. And down below under the action section, we have that little clock where you can click on to get additional information on the status of your application. And on the top, we have the messaging section where you can send out messages to other providers or the reviewer of your application. And usually if there are any changes on your application, you should be able to go under the messaging section in order to view why an application was sent to you. If it was sent to you, it would equally have messages if you submitted a new application. And under messages, it will tell you when that application was approved. And the notification pretty much keeps you updated on what's happening with your accounts on ePREP. And that's pretty much it on how to create applications and how to go through your applications. Since we're done with the slide for now, we have an open question and answer section. If you have any questions, feel free to just type them in and then we can answer those questions for you. And like I said at the beginning, you can always go under the Maryland webpage in order to view this slide again if you needed it for like future reference. And a lot more information is on there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just type in your questions and we'll try to see how we can help out with the answers for those questions.
Okay, Charles, we have two questions. The first question is, how do you affiliate providers and clinics when both are new? In other words, how do you do it if the clinic and the rendering provider are both new, since the group needs to have a rendering provider and the rendering provider should be listing a group? If they're both new, how would you go about that?
Okay, we have situations like that happen a lot where a new group is, we're starting up a new group. So usually when you're starting a new group and you start the application, you have the option of creating a rendering, of adding a rendering provider. So when you're doing a new groups application, then you would put in that new provider's information in there. Let's see if I have that on my slide. Okay. If we notice on the left here, under the content section, we have the rendering provider affiliations. So this, for example, may have been a new group we're creating an application for. Under the rendering provider affiliation section, you will put in that new provider's information in order for the provider to be added to the new group. And that's how we go about adding a new provider to a new group. Okay.
Okay, the second question wants clarification around dental providers and revalidation. They'd like to know if it's every 3 years, not every 5 years.
So for dental providers, I think for now they're the only exception. Dental providers are due for revalidations every 3 years, not 5 years like the other providers. And like I said, you would always receive a mail first indicating that you're due for revalidation. And if you get on the portal, you would equally have a notification on there telling you how much time you have left to get your revalidation done. But for now, I know that dental providers are the only exception with 3 days for revalidation. If there are any other providers I'm not sure of yet, we would definitely have that updated for you on the Maryland webpage. But for now, dental providers are the only providers with 3 years for their revalidations.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. The next question says, when you create an application on behalf of a new Medicaid provider, would you start the application process on the group or the individual provider's portal information?
Thank you very much. So for new providers, it's always nice to understand that we have providers who want to be solo providers and rendering providers. Like we already know, rendering providers will be practicing under a group. So you can always start a rendering provider's application from their own account on ePREP. And then since the group is an existing group, you would have that option of affiliating that provider to the group. And you can equally start a rendering provider's application from the group's account. If you go in there and you indicate that you're trying to add a new rendering provider, it can make you start that application from the group's account, but you will still have to send that application to the provider's account in order for the provider to sign the application. Like we said earlier, all new rendering providers' applications must be signed from their accounts. So if you start a rendering provider's application from the group's account, it would still have to be signed from the provider's account in order for that application to be submitted. And for solo providers, you can always just start. The application should always be started from their accounts.
And then the last question is asking for clarification that a new provider has to be added before they can add the group. Is that correct?
No. The group, if it's a rendering provider, the group's application has to be created first, and then you can add other providers into the group. And like I said, when you're creating a group's application, you would always have the option to put in a rendering provider. So if you was a new provider and you were creating the group's application, you would go in there and you would put in that provider's NPI number, and it would generate an application for the new rendering provider. If it's an existing provider, it just creates an affiliation application or a rendering S application where the group would just sign, approving that the group will sign, and the provider would equally sign, approving that they want to be part of that group. But if it's a brand new provider who is trying to be a rendering provider, the portal automatically generates a new application for that rendering provider. And were there any other questions?
The last question we have is, how is ePREP beneficial to an RSA provider?
So if an RSA provider is under the Medicaid program, like every other provider, it's very, it provides them access to their own information, like every other provider. They should be able to go in there and view their information and make updates like every other person. And again, it makes the process of creating applications and updating information a little easier. So as long as you're a Medicaid provider, this really makes everything, viewing your accounts, making changes, getting updates on what's happening with Medicaid, the ePREP portal is really, really very beneficial at keeping you updated with all of that information. Okay. And did we have any other questions?
I do not see any other questions.
Okay, and like we said at the beginning of the webinar, we would have this webinar put up on the Maryland webpage, and every other information you need on ePREP can always be found under the Medicaid, the Maryland webpage. Or you can always call the call center, and we'll try to see how we can help you with a lot more of the questions you may have. Since we have no more questions, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and I hope you have a great day.